Peace and love, family. Peace and love. Welcome to another powerful discussion with your sister, Dr. Maat. I'm here tonight, family, to review a soul panel, a Fox Soul panel discussion that I participated in maybe over a month ago. I think maybe back in like March or April. Fox Soul have reached out to me. It's a particular show called The Business of Being Black with Tammy Mack, and they reached out to me and asked me to participate in a panel discussion on the topic or the question: is America a racist country? And so, and this, let me tell you where this came from. Let me tell you where what inspired this discussion. Um, Prior to that, we had a discussion on, I came on Fox Soul and we talked about if the NFL was a racist institution. And then after we finished recording, because all of these discussions, families, are pre-recorded, okay? When we finished recording, the panelists, we all started arguing about America and America being racist. I mean, we started arguing. And so the producers of the show, they were like, oh, we had to bring you all back on to have that discussion, right? To discuss whether or not America is a racist country. And of course, family, you know, it's always, look at this. You see my shirt, right? Red pill and blue pill, right? So you know that the red pill, let me bring up my Google. So remember, the red pill and blue pill, it says it refers to a choice between the willingness to learn a potentially unsettling or life-changing truth by taking the red pill or remaining in a contented ignorance with the blue pill. So, you know, a lot of our people have taken the blue pill, family. That's why for this discussion, I had to rock this shirt, right? A lot of our people have taken the blue pill, and some of my folks who are in the building, peace to brother Take, peace to brother Steve, peace to Obafemi, peace to brother Trey, Alkebulon, Dr. Craig, A Beautiful Mind, Kicking Dope Logic. And so, family, you already know we all took the let me see, we took the red pill. A lot of people took that daggone blue pill. And so that's why they say the foolishness that they say. They want to be content in their ignorance. So they've taken the blue pill and they've gone on about their business. But we've taken the red pill and we about our liberation. Ashe? So anyway, family, tonight I'm going to review the discussion with you. You're going to be appalled. So for some of you who haven't seen the discussion, you're going to be appalled. Because, of course, I know a lot of you are like Dr. Maat. Like, you probably looked at the question and said, of course, America's a racist country, right? But would you believe that it was two Negroes, and I am calling them Negroes, on the panel who argued that it's not? That is not. Can you believe that? That is not. Okay, that is not. I wonder if we had this conversation after the Buffalo massacre, would they have changed their position? Probably not, right? I mean, because hell, we just had Dylan Roof, that was 2012, and people still running around talking about America's not a racist country. Anyway, family, without further ado, I'm going to share my screen with you so we can get started. I haven't been invited back. I want to say that again. Your sister, Dr. Maat, by the way, let me put myself down the bottom. Your sister, Dr. Maat, by the way, family, has not been invited back because you already know that I'm going to keep it 100. You already know. If you know me and you've been connected with me, because I don't like saying follow. That stuff is like bogus. I feel like I've connected with people, like, you know, via social media. So I've connected with Dr. Craig. I connected with A Beautiful Mind. I've connected with you all. So I feel like we're connected. I don't feel like no one's following me. I feel like I've connected with beautiful Black African people. And so anyway, family, I haven't been invited back since, but it's all good. And I guess when you see this, when you watch the panel discussion, you'll see why, right? So here we go. And let me reshare, because sometimes I'll share my screen and you all will start yelling at me in the chat and say, Doc, you're not sharing your audio. So let me make sure that I do that. Okay. So I did it, family. Let's rock and roll.
Welcome to Business of Being Black with Tammy Mack. I am Tammy Mack on Fox Soul. So many Americans believe that the United States represents freedom and liberty. But when Thomas Jefferson penned All Men Are Created Equal, his vision of equality was not all inclusive because African Americans were not a part of it. But despite being denied freedom and justice for all, Black Americans still believed, we still to this day, believe in the American dream. And through centuries of Black resistance and civil rights protests, cases such as Brown versus the Board of Education, the Tuskegee syphilis trials, police brutality, calls for police reform, and promises of diversity and inclusion initiatives, is America still a racist country? Let's get down to business. The business of being Black is America. Is it still racist? Please welcome the
All right. So before she introduces the panel family, I'm glad that she established at the beginning of the discussion that we weren't included in that dream of, life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness, for all, or whatever it says, right? Life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. That wasn't us, right? Because all of this stuff was, signed and created during 1776, right? The Constitution, I believe the Constitution or the Declaration of Independence. We're talking about the late 1700s, right? And we know that Africans in America wasn't emancipated until 1863. So in that vision, right, when they were writing the Constitution and talking about all men, they weren't thinking about Black men. They weren't even thinking about white women at that time. But anyway, they weren't thinking about Black men. They weren't thinking about Black women. They weren't thinking about Black people, right? Because literally we were still on plantations, right? On, as I'm thinking about Dr. Hunter Adams, he called them concentration camps, right? That's where we were, right? Or in camps, concentration camps. I don't know if you call them concentration camps or call it something else. But anyway, that's what we were doing. We were on plantations, right? Working from Kansas to Kansas, cultivating cash crops for Europeans, right? And these cash crops enriched European people. And so that was happening in the late 1700s. So when the Constitution or the Declaration of Independence and the Constitution was written, we weren't in mind. They didn't have us in mind at this time, right? So I'm glad that she started it off with that. And that's why the 4th of July is foolish to see Black people running around during the 4th of July, dressing up with the red, blue, and white. Red, blue, and white on and all of that. Red, white, and blue shirts and the Uncle Sam hats and all of that stuff. They look crazy, right? Running around with that stuff because literally our ancestors were still enslavement, chattel slavement, and you running around celebrating the 4th of July as your freedom. So anyway, then she moved on to talk about all of the things that we went through, Jim Crow and the civil rights movement and the Black Power movement and all of that, because literally we were fighting to be seen as humans, to be seen as humans and to be treated as humans, right? And so she takes us through that, and I applaud her for that history. But it goes to show you, man, if a country isn't racist, right, then you wouldn't have to fight to be viewed as a human being in that company. If it wasn't racist, like we wouldn't have had to do all of that, right? And so the question in and of itself is, I want to be respectful. I don't want to say it's silly in my opinion, because if you look at that, just having to fight to be viewed as a human being, then yeah, in this country, obviously, yeah, is racist, right? Because why did we have to fight to be recognized as a human being? Because we are of a different race. Even though I know some of you will say, well, Dr. Maat, there's no such thing as race. Race is a social construct. It's only one race, and that's the human race. I get it. But let's be honest. That concept of race, even though it is a social construct, it still carries psychological and material value. Let's not get it twisted, okay? So let's not get it twisted. So here we go. She's getting ready to introduce the panel.
The co-founder of Ed Anime Productions and professor of engineering at Morgan State University, Dr. Oye Maat, executive director and host Derek Wilburn, African American Studies professor, Dr. Keith Mays, and councilman of San Jacinto, Pastor Brian E. Hawkins. Hi, everyone.
Hey, Tammy.
Hi, Tammy. Hi, Tammy. Pleasure to be back on your show.
Forgive.
Tell me in the chat real quick. Can you identify who's going to be saying, who's arguing against America being a racist country? This is Derek right here. This is the pastor. and this is a brother I forgot. I know he's a professor at a university. Off rip, family. Tell me in the chat, who do you think will be arguing that America is not a racist country? Tell me in the chat before we even start. Tell me in the chat, who do you think? It's two of them. I already told you that at the beginning of the show. It's two people who are going to be arguing that America is not a racist country. What two people do you think? So people said the pastor. Who else? So people said the pastor. Who else could you think? So you have the pastor. You have this brother. I think he works in African American studies at a university. And then you got Derek. Who do you think? So everyone said top right. So you think the pastor and Derek. Everybody said definitely the pastor. Who's the second person? Yep, people said Derek. All right, family, here we go.
Forgive me for jacking up my two favorite guest names there, Dr. Maat and Derek. But let's talk about it. Let's get down to business. So why should Black people care if America is, still, was, or ever racist? Pastor, I'm going to give this one to you, Pastor Hawkins.
Absolutely, and I want to thank you for allowing me to be on your show. It's kind of hard for me to really look at America today as saying it's racist. I sit here as an elected official, the first African-American elected official in my city. I also helped the neighboring city, Hemet. Malcolm Lilienthal become the first African-American mayor in the city of Hemet, which was labeled a sundown town. And, you know, when I look at my journey to where I am now, 15 years ago, my name was Inmate Hawkins. You know, I spent 10 years in prison in the state of California. And now I sit here as an elected official running for Congress, you know, at the highest level of our, you know, federal government. And so, you know, to look at my own journey, I know people say it's an anecdotal, but, you know, everything starts with an anecdotal. Everything starts with someone making a difference. And from there, we champion that moment. And so, you know, I look at how many immigrants come over here now with the opportunity of seeing what the U.S. Constitution gives us access to. Even Frederick Douglass says in his 4th of July speech, there is hope for us, you know, when we, you know, delve into what we have access to.
But why should Black people care, Pastor Hawkins?
Well, I mean, the idea that we hear now, I mean, you know, we live in America, we live in, you know, this country. Many of us can't trace our roots back to Africa. Many of us don't even know our ancestral DNA. We can say that based on our skin pigmentation, that obviously we have African descent, that we're from Africa. But as far as the American dream, the ideal of America, you know, it's woven into that idea. Many of us quote that statement, we built this, you know, and I mean, so many, I can say history has obviously denied the accomplishments and achievements, and we're starting to learn about African-American advancements and their involvement in this American dream of the fabric of it. But to look at so many people, even us today, as we sit on the show, you know, our ancestors would be in awe of where we're at today. And I think that it's important that we do finally cross over Selma. You know, you showed a few pictures earlier. One of the pictures was the Woolworth counter. Mr. Clarence Henderson was the 4th person in that picture. I was with him about a month ago. I flew him in from North Carolina and to sit down and talk with him and to hear his story. And it's unfortunate that many people have yet to hear his name and know much about him simply because he's a Republican. And I think that that's the part right there that really hurts the most, that we become divided by our political ideology and stop being Black. Regardless of our political beliefs, we still are Black in America. And until we get a hold of that, we'll never be able to move our part forward.
Yeah.
Did you all catch that hogwash? Let me get beside the daggone screen, right? Let me go here. Did you all catch that hogwash? Like, he is saying that America, did you catch his talking points? And so that's why I made sure when I was sitting on the panel that I listened attentively to what he was saying, and, you know, to make sure that I was comprehending, you know, everyone's point, but I was listening to him attentively. So he's basing his personal experience, right? He said, it's hard for me to say that America is a racist country. And he goes into, he was once incarcerated and now he's become, you know, an elected official. And then he went from that to talking about how at one city, someone was the first Black mayor, or like the first black is a damn, a red flag that we still living in a racist country, right? That we're still talking black first in 2022, right? Literally, he said, because I don't know if some county he mentioned, you all had to play it back, but he said, yeah, it's the first black mayor over here, and just because even you're mentioning first black in 2022 it proves, it gives credence that America is still a racist country, right? So then you're basing that America is or is not a racist country based on your personal experiences, right? Not based on uh, the collective, right? And what we are collectively experiencing here in America. And then three, I'm trying to think, what was his other point, family? So he's an elected official, his personal experience. Some county or city has a first black mayor. Oh, he said that our ancestors will be in awe because we've made progress in America. We've made progress. Now, remember, family, this is the same pastor who I don't know if he said it on this show. I don't want to give it away. I don't want to give it away. I don't want to give it away. I was getting ready to tell you. But this pastor honestly believes that black people have progress. So even though 99% of us work for white folks around 1870, shout out to Dr. Claude Anderson and Powernomics for that stat. So in 1870, 99% of black people work for white people. I think as of like 2012 or 2000, I don't know, I think it was 2012 or 2016, he said 98% of black people. So the pastor would look at that 1% and say, oh, we're making progress. We're making progress. Our ancestors, they bought land, they built their own businesses, they built their own schools. Salute to Booker T. Washington, Tuskegee model, where he built a school that was totally self-sufficient and promoted racial pride. Now our students go to HBCUs, private and public, that are run by the black bourgeois or the state, right? And we call this progress. So you got a bunch of black doctors and lawyers out here, black business people out here, all working to support the system that is oppressing us. And he calls this progress. Anyway, I'm going to go ahead, family. I'm going to digress. Let me put myself back at the bottom of the screen.
We built this country for the free. Dr. Maat, why should Black people care if America is still racist?
Absolutely. I mean, we should care because we live here. We experience this reality. And I just want to begin by just stating, giving the viewers a working definition of racism, right? Dr. Amos Wilson, in his book, Blueprint for Black Power, defined racism as a structural relationship based on the subordination of a racial group by another. He says, given this perspective, the determining feature of race relations is not prejudice towards Blacks, but rather the superior position of whites in the institutions. Why should we care? Because Dr. Neely Fuller tells us that racism, it impacts the 9 areas of human activity: economics, education, entertainment, labor, law, politics, religion, sex. And Dr. Frances Cress Welsing added another category, which is health. So why should we care whether or not America is racist? Because it affects all areas of all areas of people activity. That's why we should care. And there were 2 things, Tammy, that Pastor Brian said that were problematic for me. He said 2 things that were problematic. He said, one, he's basing whether or not America is racist on his personal experience. Well, what about the collective, Tammy? What about the collective of Black people? What is the collective, the group as a whole? What are we experiencing in America at this particular time? The second thing that he said that was problematic for me was when he said, oh, if our ancestors came back today, they will be proud of where we come. Well, according to Dr. Claude Anderson's book, Powernomics, back in 1870, 99% of Black people worked for white people. Now it's 98%. So we haven't made much progress at all, but I digress, Tammy.
Woo! I get pumped up listening to my daggone self, family, because I wanted to read that passage. But notice, family, what I did was I gave the panel a working definition of racism, right? What is racism? Because Dr. Claude Anderson, shout out to Dr. Claude Anderson. He used to go around the country and he would say, y'all don't even know what racism is. You think racism is someone calling you the N-word, or racism is someone saying mean things to you. You view that as racism. Dr. Claude Anderson and Dr. Amos Wilson and even Dr. Nilly Fuller, Dr. Francis Cress Wilson, all of them wanted us to understand that racism is a structure. It's a system in which one group is subordinated, or I'm sorry, is subjugated. That's the word I was looking for. One group is subjugated by another group of people. That's what it is. It's not just somebody calling you the N-word or someone making comments about your blackness. That's not racism, right? Racism is an actual system that affects all areas of human activity. And that's what I wanted the panel to understand. And so that's why I purposely started with a working definition, but you're going to see how it just went over everybody's heads. Watch.
Derek, why should Black people care?
Before we even get that far, Tammy, which, by the way, it's always a pleasure to see you.
The pleasure's all mine.
Any day I see you is going to be a good day. We need to define what it is we're talking about. The issue that we have to set up this conversation around is simply this. What are we talking about? So if we say America is racist, that statement on its surface doesn't even make any sense. That's like saying Cleveland is racist. That's like saying Burger King is racist. Burger King can't be racist. That's the assignment of individualistic characteristics to corporate entities. So are there racists in America? Of course. Nobody would argue that that's not the truth. But it's impossible for America to be racist. So we really have to define.
Are there racists in America? Are there racists in America? Yes. But America isn't racist. Okay.
What is it that we're talking about, and then talk about that division. We can't simply say America from Bangor, Maine to San Diego, California is racist, because that's just not true.
So it sounds like, Derek, it sounds like the title of my show here is problematic in terms of getting some answers. So let's rephrase, let's reboot. Does America have a race?
Oh my gosh. So let me just say something. He's trying to say, he's playing these games, right? But you can't say, we're applying human characteristics to a thing, to an entity, to a corporation. America is a country, right? And if you just do a quick Google search of country, a country is a nation with its own government, right? Occupying a particular territory, okay? Or, I'm looking at part 2. It says districts and small settlements outside large towns, cities, or the capital. So that is a country, right? It's a nation with its own government. Now, if the government, right, is racist, because now you're saying it's not such thing as systemic racism. So if the government has created a racist system, then we can say that the country is racist. Am I missing something, family? Just tell me if I'm missing it. Tell me if it's going over. I know I got my PhD in engineering, but tell me, family, am I missing something right now? I want to read the dictionary, the definition again. Do a quick Google search. A country is a nation with its own government occupying a particular territory. So if the government that is on that territory has created a racist system, can't we say that the country is racist? All right, family. All right.
This aspect.
Is it still me?
Yeah.
America, no, because individuals in America may, even institutions in America may. We may look at, for instance, the institution of home lending. We may look at the issuance of mortgages.
So is that why Black people should care? Is that why Black people should care? Because of
course,
like mortgage?
Of course, and we can do that, but you can't simply say America is racist. That just doesn't make any sense.
Is there racism in America?
Of course.
Does that make better sense to you?
There is racism in America. Nobody with a brain would deny that fact.
Tammy, the initial conversation.
Hold that thought. Keith, okay. Why should Black people care if there is racism in America? I've adjusted the question so that it won't be problematic.
Thank you.
Black people should care because they still are the victims of racism. And a country and its institutions are only as good as the people who are in them and run them. So your question could be semantic. You can make, Tammy, semantic adjustments, but the question is still the same question. This country is still through and through racist. We only have to look at the recent developments around education and the banning of books, particularly books by Black authors. All we have to do is look at the voter suppression laws in the last 10 years. Because the Supreme Court in 2013 and shall be beholden overturned many of the provisions of the Voting Rights Act. So we always have, I tell my students all the time, we have a Black and brown movement, but we also have a white counter movement. And there are a certain segment of white America that will not rest until all of the gains that Black people typically make in a generation are rolled back.
And that's a fact.
You look at the history of this country over the last 100 years, and there's always a white counter movement. And I tell my students this as well, that politicians don't roll out of bed typically and give you rights. Grassroots movements, organizations, well-meaning people, ordinary folk, leaders have to fight for those rights. They have to put pressure on the system to get a modicum of progress. And typically that progress comes through new legislation, new laws. So the mere fact that Black people have to continue to still fight for basic rights tells you that America is still racist.
That's right.
What basic rights are we still fighting to get?
Voting rights.
We don't have voting rights?
We don't have them in the way that we had them 50 years ago.
How so?
Because we have new voter suppression laws that will deny people our right to a vote if they don't have certain things.
Like the ability to demonstrate that they are themselves. So the producing identification and proving that you are indeed yourself is voter suppression.
You didn't need it. Why do you need an identification to go and exercise your right to vote? Why do you need anything?
So why do you need an identification to check into a hotel?
But here's the thing. If you didn't need these things 50 years ago when the Voting Rights Act was passed, if all you needed for most of the history of voting rights, and we only got voting rights since 1965, if you never needed anything more than a utility bill, why is it that the state governments are requiring that I have a voter ID?
Well, I do want to say one quick thing, and shout out, I love this brother, Dr. Keith Mays. I understand the point that he was making. He said we got rights in 1965 to Voters' Rights Act in 1965, but that was on the books, family, during the Reconstruction era. Okay, we had, Black men at that point had the right to vote during the Reconstruction era, so that was on the books then. Well, at least for Black men, so collectively, I see what he's saying. And then, the women's movement and all that stuff, but we did have the right to vote that was already on the books. But other than that, I think he was on point.
Let's take a break on that and come right back on Business of Being Black with Tammy Mack. We'll take a quick break. Put some fire in Fox laws. Well, welcome back to Business of Being Black with Tammy Mack. I'm Tammy Mack, and the business of being Black today is America. Do we still live in a racist country? Well, Keith made a few suggestions here when he said, listen, America is still racist. We've got voter suppression laws. And Derek said, what voter suppression laws? I voted. I'm Black. Nobody suppressed me. Keith, I'm sure you voted. Dr.Maat, I'm sure you voted. Pastor, I'm sure you voted. We're all Black. Where's the suppression here? Derek, is that what you wanted to suggest? How is that racist? We all voted.
If the law says that anybody and everybody must prove that they are themselves in order to vote, then how is that discriminatory against Blacks? That's like saying that we don't have the ability to produce an ID, but white people do. I'm not buying that. And frankly, I think it's insultful for the system to tell us that we can't produce IDs, but it isn't discriminatory to have whites produce IDs.
No, they just know exactly, who is likely to be able to produce one based on levels of poverty, based on the way we live. So the mere fact that we are required to produce an ID has everything to do with race and socioeconomics. And so they know that. Listen, a lot of the Jim Crow laws were race neutral.
Come on.
Yes, poll taxes, grandfather clauses said nothing about race. Just like the voter ID laws say nothing about race, but they know who the laws will impact. They know that.
Okay, so blacks can't produce IDs, whites can. Got it.
I think that's an unfair argument because many individuals, you talk about the low income area, you need an ID to apply for low income benefits. And so to suggest that individuals don't have an ID or it's hard for them to get an ID, how are they able to acquire state or government benefits without an ID? As a matter of fact, I recently saw an interview out in Atlanta, Georgia, where it's kind of becoming the center of voter suppression. Out in Georgia, they walked around and asked many individuals, including some homeless people, about actually having access to an ID. And many of them, if not all of them, said that they had an ID. So I think that argument is becoming more just a media talking point than the actual truth. No one is being denied access to an ID. And if so, the amount of money that's being spent, the government can easily develop a program to make sure and assist that everyone do have an ID.
Pastor Hawkins, I want to stay with you on this for a minute because you suggested that America's no longer racist because you just helped the first African-American mayor come into office. Well, my question is,
did you hear this, family? Like, I'm just like, he literally, the pastor said, America's not racist because he assisted with the first African-American mayor to come into the office. And we're still talking about Black first in 2022. And no one sees anything wrong with that. Let's keep looking, family.
It's 2022. Why should we have a first African-American anything? We should be on at least, from 1965 to 22, I'd say. We should have at least that many amounts of people who are Black that have attained some semblance of success and not still be happy to claim being the first of anything anymore.
Absolutely, you're right. And so let's go back to what Dr. Maat said in 1870, which she said 99% of Blacks work for whites, and in 2020, 98% Blacks work for whites. It's not by choice. I mean, it's not by force. And individuals, are choosing not to become entrepreneurs. Individuals are choosing to work, and there's nothing stopping. We have more resources and knowledge and information. I'm big on not being the first. I talk about, it's not about the first, it's about the second and the third. The reality of it is most individuals aren't getting involved. I look here in California, there are 22 million registered voters in the state of California. 22 million, only 704,000 are Black. Out of 22 million registered voters in the state of California, only 704,000 are Black. So that tell you something. One, we really don't get involved, whereas in 1965, and that's why I said it's time for us to really cross over Selma. In 1965, we fought for the very rights, and now we're taking for granted, or we're not even getting ourselves involved in. And that's the reality of it. It's not about me being the first. I wish I wouldn't have been the first, but there were many people who lived in this community that just didn't see the need to run, or even thought about running, or even thought if it was possible. So,
but just the mere suggestion that Black people don't even think it's possible suggests that racism still exists, because there's a mindset. That's the problem with racism. It creates a mentality that exists long after the actual application of it in white people and Black people. Dr. Maat, would you agree?
I would agree 100% with you that white people participate in racism, some unconscious and some of them consciously participate. They actually benefit from racism. If you study the policies, let's go back to President Roosevelt, Franklin D. Roosevelt and his New Deal policies. There were policies that were created, and just as Dr. May said earlier, that excluded Black people. They didn't say we're specifically excluding Black people, but what they did was they shaped the policy such that only white people could benefit from the policies. And what that did was create Black ghettos and white suburbs, and it placed white people at the top of the racial hierarchy and Black people at the bottom of the racial hierarchy, which is racism. It's a structural relationship. So I don't understand how anyone on this panel can say that racism doesn't exist when we still exist in an environment that has a racial hierarchy with one.
I misspoke right here and caught myself, family. I didn't, because they did admit that racism does exist, but they're arguing that America itself, in it of itself, is not racist. So I meant to say that I didn't understand how anyone on the panel could say that America is not a racist country. So I misspoke right here, family.
Group of people at the top and another group of people at the bottom. So to sit here and say there's no racism and we still are dealing with that hierarchy, the hierarchy is madness. And I want to say this, Tammy, before I digress. I want to say this. Earlier today, when you corrected your title, you didn't need to correct your title. Is America racist? Well, to be American, right, someone of America, is to be white, which was a human category that was created in the 1600s, right after the Nathaniel Bacon Rebellion, okay? And along with whiteness came laws, a package of laws that gave psychological and material value to whiteness, which created a racial hierarchy. America is built on racism, and Black people suffer from it while white people benefit from it.
Derek.
Oh! I need to hit the daggone fire sound on my god daggone self. All right, family. Let me stop.
Is there a such thing as white privilege?
I don't suffer from racism and I'm Black, so that just proves that. Nobody on this panel has said racism.
Did this fool just say I don't suffer from racism and I'm Black? Did he just really say that? That he doesn't suffer from racism? After I broke down Dr. Neely Fuller's words and talked about how racism impacts every area of human activity, media, education, health, economics, politics, did he really come back and say I'm Black and racism doesn't impact me? It was a lot of ignorance, and I'm telling you, family, like it was so hard to like try to keep my game face on because I was so disgusted at a lot of the things, since I'm doing this review, I'm just being candid with you all. I was just so like disgusted with a lot of the things that were said. You know what I mean? Like the excuses, it was just, I was literally disgusted. But anyway, I'm gonna keep on going.
Doesn't exist. Nobody. I don't know where Dr. Maat got that. You asked me point blank, does racism exist? I said, yes, it does. And I said, only a fool thinks that it does not. So I don't even know where that's coming from. But we now live in a country where the majority of people who vote, who of course are white, twice voted for a Black man to be their president. During that administration, we had 2 consecutive Black attorneys general. In the previous administration, we had 2 consecutive Black secretaries of state. We have Black mayors from coast to coast. We have Black senators. We have Black House representatives. In this country, we now have Black millionaires. We now have Black billionaires. Look at this panel. Everyone on this panel has an advanced degree. I know we have at least 2 doctors. I have a master's degree. I'm not sure about you, Tammy, but I know that you must be educated by listening to you speak. We all live, I don't know.
That's my hood. That's my hood vernacular.
Yeah, you're educated. You don't want to let on, but you're educated. We all live, I would suspect, in very comfortable middle class to upper middle class homes with 4 bathrooms and 3-car garages. We drive contemporary automobiles. Yet here we are sitting here saying Black people just can't get it done in America. How do you explain us?
Dr. Mays, how do you explain us?
Black exceptionalism. So he's saying there's no racism in America because all of us on the panel have degrees. Are you serious? So because we all have degrees on the panel, and he said advanced degrees, you're Dr. Maat, you're a doctor of engineering. So racism doesn't exist. So he's saying that racism doesn't exist because of Black exceptionalism. It gets worse, guys. It gets worse.
Derek is right. Although I come from, the mean streets of Studewood, Texas, and Houston, although I had to fight for my lunch and struggle real hard as a child, today I hold 3 degrees.
Listen, Tammy, I'm with you. I mean, I come from the former mean streets of Harlem and New York City, born and raised working poor. And you're absolutely right, Derek. I do have a doctorate. And you're absolutely right about the personal strivings of Black people. And yes, we could be more responsible. We could be more civic minded and be more civically engaged. There's no doubt about it. But it does not take away from the fact, like Dr. Maat said, about the structural aspects of what holds us back. Let me say this to you. So we were talking about voting rights, but no one questions. Now, there are over 1 million Black people behind bars. Why is it that they have to lose their voting rights? Why do they have to lose their rights to be a citizen and not be able to vote? Is that a function of white racism, or is that a function of just the law being the law that said that, guess what? We're going to say that felons can't vote if they commit a crime. So you're right. It shows up in the disparity when it comes to home. Derek, you mentioned home ownership. The home ownership in some states is 2-to-1, white to Black. Rates of incarceration. The unemployment rate is always, the Black unemployment rate is always twice, sometimes 3 times, 4 times the rate of white people. We can go on and on. Health disparities is another.
I would like to mention that Wells Fargo is facing a lawsuit right now as we speak because of not giving home ownership loans to Black people specifically. Pastor Hawkins, I'm going to have you address Dr. May's question when we return on Business of Being Black. Brian E., co-founder. Welcome back to Business of Being Black with Tammy Mack. I'm Tammy Mack, and the business of being Black today is America. Is it still racist? Well, let's get down to business with my guest today, the co-founder of Ed&Ma Productions and professor of engineering at Morgan State University, Dr. Maat, executive director and host, Derek Wilburn, African American Studies professor, Dr. Keith Mays, and councilman of San Jacinto, Pastor Brian E. Hawkins. Pastor Hawkins, when you say San Jacinto, where is that located?
It's in Riverside County, Southern California.
In California, okay, because there's a San Jacinto in Texas as well, near Houston. So since we are a global show, I wanted to make sure we knew specifically. Dr. Mays talked about incarceration and how felons could not vote. You spoke to us earlier in the show and said that you have had that route. That's a part of your journey, your experience, being able to come out of jail and still be a representative. So how do you feel about felons not being able to vote?
Well, it all depends. First, great question.
And does that make, because obviously we all know that the jail and the prison system disproportionately affects Black men more than anyone else. So does that make it a racist law?
So I think, first of all, the justice system disproportionately criminals more than anything else. We shouldn't label.
Oh, did he just say that? That is disproportionately criminal? Oh, is he trying to say that Black men are inherently more prone to criminality? Is that what he just said? Let me take it back a little bit. Hold on. Maybe it's just me.
How many people is behind the justice
being able to vote?
Well, it all depends. First, great question.
And does that make, because obviously we all know that the jail and the prison system disproportionately affects Black men more than anyone else.
And that's a fact.
So does that make it a racist law?
So I think, first of all, the justice system disproportionately criminals more than anything else. We shouldn't label how many people is behind bar based on colors, label it based on crime.
I'm sorry, say that again?
Yeah, because, people behind bars, color is not the crime. We often say, how many Black men are behind bars, but breaking the law is breaking the law regardless of color.
Yeah, but we've also found that when we go and we detect Black men who ended up not being guilty, they are disproportionately represented as well. So there are more Black men who are found guilty that in actuality are not guilty, that are serving prison time.
Absolutely. And then that has a lot to do with economic background. Most of the times you find those same cases of individuals who will probably use public defenders, as in the case we saw with O.J. Simpson in the 92 trial of the century, or 94, I believe it was. You have overwhelming stash of cash. You can hire the best attorneys and Not to suggest he did it or not, but however, that's what it is. Yeah, I am an ex-felon.
So then it's really not about criminal activity that keeps us behind bars. It's about our financial status, which
and our race,
also and our race, considering we are disproportionately paid less and have less resources.
Get them, Tammy.
Absolutely not. I mean, you can't say something because individuals choose not to have, economic background. I mean, Bill Cosby, another case. I mean, there are many individuals. How many athletes right now, that find themselves in some of the same situations. But to address this statement, yeah, I'm an ex-felon. My record is not expunged. I do have all my voting rights. Different states are different. I would definitely encourage different legislation in different states to advocate for. It's one of the reasons why I am running for Congress, because I do want to make sure that my portion of society, what I've been through, is to be a bigger voice for that. I don't believe anyone's rights should be infringed upon. I don't believe, as far as felony goes, I know that legislation, you can vote for certain things to change laws. I'm big on second chances. I'm big on making sure individuals do have their rights restored because I am an elected official. So I do speak towards that. I think that it's disingenuous sometimes when we often bring up that statement, not realizing that felons can vote for legislation that can change laws that can ultimately affect how much time an individual can get. And I think that should be a conversation too that should be had. You don't want a rapist to be able to vote on a law that can change the amount of time that a rapist would do in prison. I'm not so much concerned as mass incarceration. I am why individuals are breaking the law in the first place.
So Derek, Pastor Hawkins says, look, he's a felon. It's a part of his journey, but he also votes and he's an elected official. So that suggests that there is some progress in some of the situations and experiences that African Americans, specifically Black men, experience when it comes to racial inequality. Why don't people or can't people see the progress, Derek?
You'd have to ask some other people on this panel why they can't see the progress. This would be a racist conversation if white felons could vote, but Blacks couldn't. Now, if we want to talk about why there are more Black felons incarcerated than white felons, that's a different conversation. You have to look at different laws that are written concerning incarceration rules for possession of crack cocaine versus powder cocaine, things like that. But I think everybody can see the progress except for people who choose not to. Right now in America, approximately 12% of marriages are interracial marriages. How does that happen in a racist country? Right now in America, about 21% of all
Black people trying to run towards freedom.
What?
It's Black people trying to run towards freedom.
Stop playing me like that. Okay, stop playing me like that. 12%, 20% of adoptions interracial, but interestingly, of those 20% of adoptions, 94% are white families adopting Black children. You don't see Black families adopting white children quite as often. So anybody can see the progress we're making, and if they can't, all they have to do is look at the 44th president of the United States of America and see we've made tremendous progress.
Okay. He said a lot of stuff, family, that was both of them did, the pastor and Derek. So Derek is saying America's not racist because of interracial marriages. But if we go back in time, there's always been that mixing. You get what I'm saying? Even to the point where they had laws, right, that banded, white women from marrying Black men, right? I mean, read the book Birth of a Nation by Dr. Jacqueline Badalore. It's actually on if you look behind me, I got a pile of books that can't even fit on my bookshelf. But read that book, The Birth of a Nation, right? Birth of a Nation. Or is it Birth of a White Nation? I think that's what she calls it. But in that book, she talked about how it was always mixing. So we can't say America's not racist, is no longer racist because of some mixing happening, right? And then he's saying, well, now you have white people adopting Black children, right, at an alarming rate or at a high rate or whatever he was saying. Then my question would become, why are they adopting Black children? And then look at the type of Black children or the type of people that they're producing. Did you see Madonna? Madonna adopted a Black child. Someone can Google it right now. Go ahead and Google Madonna's Black child. There's another white woman who adopted a Black son. I forgot her name. You all can tell me in the chat. But she adopted a white boy a Black child. And the two people that I'm talking about, Madonna and this other white woman, they adopted Black boys. and their black boys are walking around right now in dresses and purses. So let me go ahead and continue to play.
I'm kind of tired of that example, to be honest about it. But
you're tired of Obama?
Dr. Maat, I have to say, there has been progression. So why can't we acknowledge the progression, Dr. Maat?
So it's that's a really a loaded question right there. When you say measure the progression, what are we measuring? Like, how exactly are we measuring progress?
Let's just measure from 1965 to 2022.
No, listen to what I'm saying, Tammy. How, when you say we've made progress, you have to talk about how you're measuring that. You have to understand, I'm an engineer. That's what I do for a living. And so you have to define progress and what that looks like. How are you measuring that? According to Pastor Brian, he's measuring that based on his personal experiences. Derek is measuring it based on this panel. What are we looking at when we measure progress? We have to look at the collective. So that means looking at home ownership, looking at the employment rate, right? Looking at the mass. So there are different factors that you need to look at in order to measure.
And I didn't mean to say employment rate. I meant to say wealth, right? Looking at wealth, looking at assets, looking at home ownerships and things like that. So that's what I was talking about there. But I kind of, I was kind of all over the place in my head. But when we're measuring progress, what I'm saying to them, and I don't know if it went over their heads, but what I was trying to convey here, family, is that when you say that Black people have progress in America, what are you measuring that? What's your barometer, right? Are you measuring that based on wealth? Are you measuring that based on land? Are you measuring that based on ownership, whether it's business ownership, home ownership? I don't know. What are you, so that's what I was trying to establish here. Because if you notice on the panel, different people were measuring progress based on different things, right? Derek said, oh, because 5 of us are on this panel and we have degrees, America's not a racist country. Then Derek also said, well, Barack Obama, he's a Black man who was voted in, which he wasn't. Barack Obama. And shout out to Judge Joe Brown. Shout out to Judge Joe Brown, who really exposed who he really is and his agenda. So anyway, he said, well, Obama is a so-called Black man and he was voted in. So that's why there's no racism. The pastor said, oh, it's no racism because I assisted with getting a Black guy elected and he became the first mayor of a city. And then he said that he's an ex-felon who became an official politician, right? And so he's saying it's no racism because of that. So here I'm trying to establish, what are we all measuring this thing by? You said we progress, and Tammy actually agreed with Derek and said that we've progressed. What are you measuring that by? Right? Nobody knows, right?
Progress. You can't say, oh, because some Black people are doing this and some Black people are doing that. As a collective, we are progressing in America. You have to you have to really detail, what does that look like? Because progress to me, Tammy, is complete freedom and sovereignty. That's what progress looks for me. Like, we're moving in the direction of sovereignty. We're not moving into the direction of sovereignty. We're moving in the direction of being comfortable under the domination of another group of people.
Oh, hold up, family. Did you hear what your sister, Dr. Maat, said? I told the panel, to me, when you talk about progress to me is that we're moving in the direction of freedom and sovereignty. I said, that is what progress looks like to me. I said, but we're not moving in the direction of freedom. And I'm talking about as a collective, moving in the direction of freedom and sovereignty. I said, we're actually moving in the direction of feeling comfortable or being comfortable under the domination of another group of people. Ashe.
So see, Derek and people like Pastor Brian, they think we're making progress, but we're still dominated by another group of people. How is that making progress?
Dr. Maat.
We are dominated by another group of people. We depend on another group of people, namely white people, so-called white people, for our basic physiological needs: food, clothing, and shelter. That's who we depend on. We depend on white folks. So you can't tell me he's going to Derek will say, "Oh, we're not dominated by another group of people." How not so, Derek? If literally we depend on them for food, clothing, and shelter. Hell, we depend on them for even the education of our children. Most Black children attend public school system. Well, who runs the public school system? Who owns and controls the public school system? The state. Let's talk about it, family. Like, am I losing it? Like,
Dominated by white people.
Go ahead.
Yes, we are. Yes, we are still being dominated by white people. Absolutely.
There is nowhere in
Absolutely.
this country that you can't go. Nowhere.
Absolutely.
You can buy a ticket. You can check into any hotel. If you can buy a home.
how is that not being dominated by a group of white people? He said, you go anywhere you want to go in America. So that is the counter argument to me saying that we're dominated by another group of people. That his counter argument is that we can go wherever we want to go in this country, so therefore we aren't dominant. There we go. The illusion of inclusion is deep, family. I'm gonna say that again. The illusion of inclusion, it runs deep, family. So because we can buy a house in a predominantly white neighborhood, then there and let me tell you something, family. Shout out to Thomas Shapiro. Read the book, The Hidden Cost of Being an African American. He'll tell you, soon as Black folks start moving in and the threshold exceeds 12% in the neighborhood, was it 8 or 12%? He said white folks then began to move out. So Derek thinks because we can live next to white folks, work next to white folks, we can go to restaurants where white folks go, that America isn't a racist country. We're not being dominated by white people because we can work with them. We can live in their neighborhoods to a degree, because racial covenants still exist to a degree. We can live in white neighborhoods and we can travel and check in the hotels. That's what he said. We're not being, let me take it right back. Hold on, let me take it back a little bit.
In any neighborhood in which you can afford.
Into the direction of sovereignty. We're moving in the direction of being comfortable under the domination of another group of people. So see, Derek and people like Pastor Brian, they think we're making progress, but we're still dominated by another group of people. How is that making progress?
I'm
Dr.
dominated
Mays.
by white people.
Go ahead.
Yes, we are. Yes, we are still being dominated by white people. Absolutely.
There is nowhere in
Absolutely.
this country that you can't go. Nowhere.
Absolutely.
You can buy a ticket. You can check into any hotel. If you can buy a home in any neighborhood in which you can afford it. You can do anything in this country that you choose to do. There's one thing that people like Dr. Maat do not do. American, United, Virgin Atlantic, all these places sell one-way tickets out of the United States. Very few Blacks ever buy them. And there's a reason for that, because we have
Black
freedom and
people
sovereignty in this
repatriating,
country.
Oh, Derek, are you
Black
telling
people
Black
are
folks to go
repatriating.
back to Africa?
Black
No,
people
not at
are
all.
repatriating.
France. I mean, we can live wherever we want to.
Black
We can go
people
anywhere
are
we want to in this
repatriating.
country. There is nothing restricting us from going anywhere in this country.
Because
Nothing.
we built it. We built it, Derek. We built
So
it.
what?
Yeah, I don't
So
have to
what?
go
We can't go
anywhere.
nowhere. We can't. We will never go anywhere. We built it with our.
What do you mean we built it?
We built it with our bare hands.
With our bare hands, we built Chicago, Illinois,
Yes, we did.
skyscrapers.
Yes,
We built
did.
this country.
We
Derek.
built
We
the
built this
interstate.
country.
The interstate highway system that connects all the cities in this country was built by Blacks.
Slave labor built the United
Slave labor
States
built
of
the
America.
And that's a
Interstate highway
fact,
system?
Derek. And that's a fact, Derek.
And-
Wait a minute. Slave
a
labor
fact.
built the interstate highway system when the automobile wasn't invented for another 60 years.
No, what they did was they took the interstate highway and they ran it through Black neighborhoods across the country.
Come
No,
on.
that's not what you said. You said the
That's
slaves built it.
No, I'm just saying that Black people built it with their labor. Right?
No, so you're saying that Blacks
19
built the interstate highway system. Slaves
No,
built
he didn't. He just said Black
No, I
people
said that-
built this
I
country.
said
Stop
that-
it, Derek.
That is
Exactly.
not what he said.
So
He
my
said
thing is,
slaves.
Dr.
Yes, he did.
Your
Yes, he did.
example of Barack, they treated Barack Obama so bad, Derek, in the 8 years. And they ushered in a Tea Party revolution that opened the door for Donald Trump. So what do you say about Barack Obama and his legacy?
What does that have to do with the price of tea in China? Talk about dodging the question, but I'll tell
That's
you
not
what.
dodging the country. What about the treatment of Barack Obama in the 8 years that he served?
Let's talk about that when we come back
Barack
on Business
Obama
of Being
was-
Black with Tammy Mack on Fox Soul.
Myself, I feel like
God says, look, Welcome back to Business of Being Black with Tammy Mack. I am Tammy Mack on Fox Soul. So Dr. Mays, Dr. Maat says, look, folks still following me when I'm walking in the store. Racism still exists. However, Derek says, look, you can sit anywhere you want to on the bus. You don't have to go to the back. You can eat at the counter in Woolworth now. How does racism possibly exist? Dr. Mays, how so? And how do we measure the progression?
I like what Dr. Maat said about the numbers and how do you measure, or what are you measuring? So I'm looking at an article in front of me. It says Black workers are twice as likely to be unemployed as white workers at almost all educational levels, right? So we're talking about Black people with college degrees that are unemployed at higher rates of white people.
Teach.
So we could talk about the disparities, and those are numerics. That's the data. That's what the statistics say, right? So yes, we are structurally discriminated against still, but we are also discriminated against at the level of the everyday. We can't go in stores without being surveilled. There's still the ever-present reality of white mob violence. We are always 1 day, 1 minute from being killed at the hands of a white person. Not because, wait, Derek, not because it was accidental, but because it was purposeful and it was racially motivated. How many white people do you know are killed that's racially motivated at the hands of somebody Black?
That's the wrong question.
Pastor Hawkins,
that's the evidence. That's the evidence.
Jump in here, Pastor Hawkins.
Question.
Yeah, it's unfortunate that here we are in 2022 and we're still trying to find racism in America. It's like we're intentionally looking.
You hear this, family? I wanted to see this. This was recorded before the Buffalo Massacre, right? This was recorded before then, but even still, this was recorded after the Dylann Roof situation. But see, they're denying these people. I'm telling you, that's why I have on my red pill, blue pill. That's why I have on my. They took the blue pill. They've taken the blue pill.
Well, now we don't really have to look for it. It just kind of finds us.
Well, right? It is because, here's the thing though. At the end of the day, one, I don't live in the suburbs. I still live in the hood. So that's number one. So I don't live in, I don't got 4 or 5 bathrooms, and I don't have a degree. As a matter of fact, I got my high school diploma when I was in jail. And so to be on this panel really kind of like sales to talk about measurement. So in 1972, there was a convention in Gary, Indiana, right? 1972, it was called like the Black Convention. If you go and look it up, it was really powerful. Out of that convention, this was the year that Shirley Chisholm was running Unbossed and Unbothered.
Yes.
And she ran for president. That following election, over 3,000 newly Black elected officials were in office. Why? Because they had a centered agenda. And we often say, we're not progressing and moving forward. So the question is who? Even Harriet Tubman, as far as freeing slaves, literally made a quote, said, I could have freed more had slaves known that they were slaves. And so the thing is, there are many individuals, and I do agree with Dr. Maat, that are comfortable. But to make an excuse to say we're not progressing and moving forward, you can't blame the collection of individuals who have gotten comfortable on the plantation, that have gotten comfortable in servitude, have gotten comfortable not wanting to move forward. Not everybody wants to move forward. Not everybody want to go and get degrees and actually live the American dream, or whatever dream you want to subscribe it to. So to suggest that Black people aren't progressing, no, but there are many Black people that are progressing. The thing is, we're not telling enough of those stories. You're a doctor at Morgan State University, an engineer. I remember watching Hidden Figures, and a Black woman, right, was talking about becoming the first Black engineer. And so I guess her shoulders is the progression measurement of where you're at now. And I know that there are many more Black engineers. The problem is we're telling more stories of being victims than being victors. We're not sharing the Dr. Maat stories. We're not sharing the Tammy Mack stories. We're not really pushing neat stories of how far we have come, because the moment we tell those stories, we throw anecdotal out there. We mentally find the excuse of it. If we start sharing what we have accomplished in America.
Shout out to Brother Omawale Africa in the building. He said, what did I just tune into, sis? I'm confused.
What we literally, and I'm talking about today, Tyler Perry bought a plantation, Confederate land, and built one of the biggest, he literally moved Hollywood to Atlanta. And then portion of the Black Panther movie was filmed on an old plantation. And he has a freeway entrance with his name on it. This man was homeless in the late 90s to where now he has a freeway exit. Only in America. That's a quote that the boxer great said. Only in America can we do that. Nowhere else in the world can we have and do what we're doing here. We need to just start telling more of those stories. And the more we tell them, the more stories we tell of Tammy Mack, I guarantee you she'll be the #1 broadcaster show on here, because these dialogues aren't happening. And I love the fact that it's a free range dialogue, because it just goes to show you how much censorship is happening. This conversation is probably one of the most brilliant conversations I've been a part of, because it has no control to it.
Well,
Don King,
Okay.
you're talking.
So Tyler Perry is evidence that of progress, and that America is not a racist country. Sit with that, family. He named Tyler Perry and said, because of Tyler Perry is an example of progress. Not because Black men collectively have what Tyler Perry had, but because of Black exceptionalism. Tyler Perry, America, we've made progress because we have a Tyler Perry. Okay, we have a Tyler Perry, so we've progressed, right? You know, we have a Tyler Perry, so therefore racism doesn't exist. Because we have a Dr. Maat, racism doesn't exist.
Talking about Don King, Pastor.
Thank you. I appreciate it.
I got you back. Go ahead, Derek. Go ahead.
No, Tammy.
Pastor is absolutely right. But Dr. Mays has said a couple of things that are very, very, very concerning. So the idea that we are all one day away from white mob violence taking our lives is simply not true. The most dangerous thing in this country for a Black man is another Black man, not the KKK. Right now, I mean, you know how many brothers were shot in Chicago this weekend alone? For some reason, we never want to talk about that. We want to find the 2 or 3 instances of white mob violence that occur every year and turn that into a problem, when today, before we end this show, a couple of guys are going to get shot in their own neighborhood.
I have to say, Derek, I'm a little tired of that argument too, as if Black people...
Tired of the truth?
Well, I'm tired of the fact that we are pushing that some people push the agenda that Black people are constantly killing Black people, as if white people don't kill white people. I mean, it's ridiculous to say.
That's what we're talking about.
Honest opinion. And you can talk to Ahmad.
Go look at the FBI stats, family. White men are, and I know some people may say, well, Dr. Maat, I mean, you know, they have a larger population than we do here, right? So of course it will be more killing, you know, amongst like white men, but they commit most of the violent crimes. Shout out to Dr. Michelle Alexander, and her book, The New Jim Crow. Most of our brothers are behind bars for nonviolent offenses. It's the white boys that are behind bars for violence. And I'm going to get to this. There's a couple of pages I want to kind of pick some information from and articulate it to you, because the pastor blamed mass incarceration on Black men, which is retarded to me. So I want to address that with The New Jim Crow by Dr. Michelle Alexander. So I do applaud Tammy Mack for telling Derek, like, I'm tired of that whole argument about Black people killing Black people. As soon as we bring up you know, white people killing us or victimizing us, then they say, well, Black people kill each other every day. You know, that's always the counter argument. But so I'm glad that she addressed this.
Arbery, when you talk about, you know, white people just coming after Black people out of nowhere for no particular reason.
Nobody said
it does exist.
Right. Nobody said it doesn't happen.
Doesn't exist.
Nobody said it doesn't happen, but what Dr. May said is we're all one day away from being killed by white mob violence.
We are.
It's just not true.
But the reason why I say that is because of the racial animus and bigotry that's still directed toward Black people. That hasn't gone away, Derek. That will never go away. And we have to acknowledge that for what it is. One would think that Ahmaud Arbery was 100 years ago, we've lived in the days of lynching. But the mere fact that occurred in 2021, 2020, whenever it happened, tells you that white racism, white mob violence still structures the lives of Black people. That's
a fact. That's a fact. And Dr. Mays, I just want to say, and Dr. Mays, I want to say too, that we're literally, it doesn't matter your educational status. It doesn't matter your social economic status. Like you said, Dr. Mays, any of us could get it. That's my hood side. Any of
But
us.
I think that what Derek is saying, Dr. Mays, is that you were a bit disingenuous when you said we're one day away from it. Now, I do sometimes when I go home to Texas feel like I'll be one day away from it. But sometimes when I'm sitting in the sunshine in Cali, I feel all right.
You have a better chance of being struck by lightning than killed by white supremacists, but you have a very good chance of being killed by black in the hood any hour of the day.
Listen, I was in Palm Springs and saw a white supremacist caravan come down the street in Palm Springs last year. So this is in California, New York, this is in the West and the North, not just the South.
So
right?
what is a white supremacist caravan? Because most likely I was probably in that caravan. So I'm trying to figure out, because we're becoming now to where we're really attacking the very fabric of America. Dr. Maat said that when the Constitution was written, she quoted Thomas Jefferson, but then leave out.
I didn't know Thomas Jefferson. You got the wrong person.
You referenced Thomas Jefferson.
I didn't reference Thomas Jefferson.
It was me that referenced Thomas Jefferson at the beginning.
By this time, family, I was aggravated. So I don't know if you hear me running my mouth in the background, like I didn't quote Thomas Jefferson. So by this time, I was kind of fed up with the pastor and Derek.
Top of the show.
Okay. Well, Thomas Jefferson was brought up in the conversation as saying that, when the America was fabric, it was started for a white agenda. And you can make that argument that it was started with a white agenda. However, you leave out the amended agenda. You leave out the part where the Constitution was amended, and it's specifically the 14th, 15th, and the 16th Amendment. And so to suggest that America hasn't progressed, even the Constitution itself, that shows that it has become a different America from even the ideology of the founding fathers. Yet maybe that was the framework of it and the structure of it, but it has been amended and it is constantly being brought up in discussion and saying, now we have access to it. In 1965, you actually have access to being voted in. You can actually vote now. And so you talk about measuring of progress. Look at the pending of July 4th, 1776, and 1965. Obviously, there's your progression right there. And even today, as we sit freely, there's no hounds chasing us down. We're not being, put on the auctioning block. We're not being sold into different parts. Our family, and even Juneteenth, which happens to be a celebratory day that was founded the Republican Party, Juneteenth was the day that you can make that argument, but I can make it probably even better one.
Let's make the argument later. I'll go to break right now.
Thomas Jefferson's a very problematic figure. He just is.
Thomas Jefferson was a damn slave owner. He raped women. He had a baby by, what was her name, y'all? Sally Hemings. Am I thinking about Sally Hemings right now? Had a bunch of children by her. And so that's why the professor, Dr. Keefe, at the end said he's very problematic. You sitting here quoting Thomas Jefferson of all people? Are you serious?
Respond. Anime Productions and Welcome back to Business of Being Black with Tammy Mack. I am Tammy Mack, and thank you so much for being here today. The Business of Being Black is America Racist. Please welcome the co-founder of Ed Anime Productions and professor of engineering at Morgan State University. Dr. Maat is here with us. Executive director and host Derek Wilburn is back. African American Studies professor Dr. Keith Mays, and Councilman of San Jacinto, Pastor Brian E. Hawkins. Pastor Hawkins was talking about a couple of constitutional amendments, I believe. Dr. Maat, you wanted to respond?
Yeah. And I didn't really want to respond. I think she kind of threw it. Dr. Keefe wanted to respond. She threw it to me. And I did mess up here, family. I had my dates wrong. So you about to catch a mistake that I definitely made.
So he mentioned some constitutional amendments. Specifically, he mentioned the 13th Amendment. And a quick Google search will show that it was the 13th Amendment was written and ratified in 1789. So he's saying we had all of these laws and amendments, right? But in 1789, Pastor Brian, we were still in slavery. We weren't emancipated until 1863. So although these amendments that you're speaking of were added to the Constitution, we had to understand we were still in slavery. right? 1789.
Yeah, my bad, family. It said the Constitution of America was 1789. But when it says the 13th Amendment, the 13th Amendment, family, it was passed by Congress on January the 31st, 1865, and ratified on December the 2nd, 1865. And the 13th Amendment abolished slavery in the United States. So I messed up my dates. It's the Constitution of the United States of America was in 1789. So that was my bad.
We were still enslaved. So what do you mean we had amendments? You got to remember, Pastor Brian, and I would suggest that you read the book, The Falsification of African Consciousness by Dr. Amos Wilson. Laws are only as good as those that enforce them, who enforces them. Laws are only as good as those who enforce them. So yes, we did have the amendment, the 13th Amendment in 1789, but we were still slaves. The second thing I wanted to address was when you brought up Tyler Perry, and you said this is a Black man that he purchased a plantation and he did this. Well, that Black man, even with all of the money that he's been allowed to accumulate, still has to go to white networks to get his work distributed. His work is distributed on BET. BET is owned by Viacom. Viacom is owned by white people. So with all of the wealth that they've allowed Tyler Perry to accumulate, at the end of the day, he still has to go to white Zaddy to get his stuff distributed.
Derek?
So absolutely. I mean, I just want to say something real quick. That's
Go ahead, Pastor.
That's a false statement about the 13th Amendment. It was passed in 1864.
Oh, sorry. I thought it was 1789. But so even with what you just said, that correction, we were going into, I guess, Reconstruction, which started.
No, man, we were.
No. Reconstruction started in 1865. Emancipation was in 1863. Emancipation was in 1863. Reconstruction started in around 65, 66, around that time. But then after that, we moved right into Jim Crow. So even with those amendments, and I must have had the date wrong, and I apologize for that. But still, even with the date that you gave us, Black people were still treated like slaves, and we moved from slavery, chattel slavery, right into Jim Crow semi-slavery. So what good were those amendments, Pastor?
That is not true, because Howard University.
That is true. I don't even understand how he could deny that. If you Emancipation, 1863. I believe Reconstruction was 1865 to 1877. But I know that I'm 100% correct. In the chat, you could tell me in the chat if I'm incorrect on this. Right after Reconstruction set in, and even during Reconstruction, but I know post-Reconstruction, we moved right into Jim Crow semi-slavery. You had the vagrancy laws, remember, the sharecropping system, convict leasing, all of that stuff happened, right? So even with having these amendments on the books, look at what was going on with Black people. Just Google the Black Code laws, or the Black Code. That's what happened. So he's trying to say that with these amendments on the books, that all of a sudden we became a protected class, and that's not true. We didn't become a protected group at all with those amendments on the book.
Constructed in 1867. Excuse me. Howard University was constructed in 1867. In 1870, you have the first Black, right, appointed and some elected officials into Congress, including Harold Rebo, was in 1870. And so to suggest that Blacks, and even then you had Blacks that owned slaves, Anthony Johnson. So to suggest that we didn't have, you had Black men that were voting during this time.
He missed the whole point, family. He missed the whole point. He made the comment, he made the claim that I mentioned the Constitution and that there were amendments to the Constitution, right? That's what he said. And so what I'm saying is, my point or my position is that even with those amendments, look at what was still happening to Black people in America. So even though those amendments were on the books, look at what happened to Black people, right? Look at what was going on. We were being lynched. Salute to Ida B. Wells. Read her work. Black people were still being lynched. We were still being, you had the convict leasing, like I said, sharecropping, like someone put in the chat, all of those Black codes going on, the vagrancy laws, they locking you up if they think you out loitering or something. So, and then putting you on the chain gangs. I mean, come on. That was my statement. My position is, okay, you're making the claim that, even though the Constitution didn't include us, they created amendments and they put amendments on the book or made amendments to the Constitution, which did, and that gave us some type of protection. And what I'm saying is, no, it didn't, because look at what we were still experiencing here in America when those amendments were put on the books. I'm not saying that during the Reconstruction period, Black men didn't do certain things or HBCU wasn't. I'm not saying that stuff didn't happen. But what I am saying is we can't act like because amendments were on the books that all of a sudden we became a protected class or protected group of people. Well, we already know following Reconstruction was the Jim Crow era. That's all I'm saying.
Not women, but Black men that were voting. So
White people
missing out.
Pastor, white people were organizing and mobilizing against that Black progress right after the Civil War.
I'm not suggesting that. You're absolutely right. The Democratic Party in 1867 or 1876 wanted the White House really bad. I mean, they wanted to end Reconstruction period. And so what they did was they made the Compromise of 1877, which essentially gave Rutherford Hayes the White House, but it ended Reconstruction period. And so from then, and then you have the emergence of the Ku Klux Klan. And so, I mean,
I'm glad he mentioned that, because I was just getting ready to say the Ku Klux Klan was established on December the 24th, 1865. So let's stop playing games.
I'm not suggesting.
I have to say this. I've learned more in the past 40 minutes than I've learned in high school. I'm sorry, in educational system. That's for sure. But Pastor, I would like for you, are you running for U.S. Congress? What can you tell us about your platform and your campaign?
Absolutely. So yeah, I am. I'm running for U.S. Congress in the 25th Congressional District. I am the leading Republican nominated congressional candidate, where I received multiple endorsements from congressmen, including even the state party. I'm running on a platform of education because I believe that that's really the part that can really cross the aisles. It's not a political thing. I'm concerned with, especially African American and Latino kids, Hispanic kids that are still performing low and below average. And so I have a huge fight. I'm big on public safety. I'm big on the cost of living, but it's big on, even my story, given the fact that there are other states where felons can't vote. And I want to be able to bring that argument to the floor and just trying to change the narrative.
That's a good platform to run on for sure. Dr. Mays, I actually attended journalism programs at the University of Minnesota. So please tell us about your work there. Yes.
Oh, wow. So I'm a professor there. I teach African American studies. I just finished a book. It'll be out in November or December, called The Unteachables, Disability Rights in the Invention of Black Special Education. So I write on educational history and civil rights, and that's what I do.
Derek, we want to hear about the POCC internship program.
POCCinterns.com. I am instrumental in recruiting Black American college students from coast to coast, send them to Washington, D.C., pay their airfare, pay their housing, pay the internship itself, so we become more involved in the legislative process in this country.
Yeah, love it. Love to hear it. Dr. Maat, you've got 2 projects, and being a professor is not an easy one. So talk to us about your work at Morgan State and also the Ed Anime Productions.
So yes, ma'am, I teach in the electrical and computer engineering department at Morgan State School of Engineering, where I teach electrical engineering from an African-centered perspective. I'm also the co-founder of Ed Anime Productions.
I find that interesting because engineering is so non-subjective. It's math, right? So
it's math and science. It's the application of math and science.
So how does that differ between white people and Black people when you?
I understand that her question was coming from a genuine place, family. But she's looking at STEM being universal. And what she doesn't understand that there is a connection between math and science and culture. A lot of people think that STEM, when you say science, technology, engineering, and math, we have to understand that those things, those tools are being created and utilized in a cultural context. So there's a connection there. So for example, when my students read about electrical engineering, do you know, family, what they start with what chapter 1 is about? It starts going through all of the different contributions that Europeans made to the field of electric circuits, right? So we can't act like it's all just universal. It's non-subject. We can't act like that, right? When you look at the laws that are applied in electrical engineering, when you talk about Ohm's law, Kirchhoff's voltage law, Kirchhoff's current law, right? These laws are named after people, right? When you think about the Fourier transform, they're named after Europeans. So let's not act like, with that STEM is disconnected from culture and history, because it's not. Even math, the Pythagorean theorem, c squared equals a squared plus b squared, right? Like, so let's not act like culture and history is disconnected from STEM, because it's not. All right, so I just wanted to say that.
You say from a Black perspective.
Well, from a Black perspective, because typically when our students learn about different engineering concepts, a lot of those concepts are named after white folks. And you would think that white people invented or created a lot of these concepts, when in fact, if you study history, you'll see that a lot of those concepts came out of Africa. So when I teach engineering, I make sure that I include the contributions that our ancestors made to the field of science, technology, engineering, and mathematics. Okay, we're the pioneers of STEM. The oldest documents are found right in Africa. They're the oldest mathematical artifacts, even structures that were built using the math and science are found right in Africa. So that's what I mean by teaching science, engineering, and math from an African-centered perspective.
All right, I'm down with it. All right.
Absolutely.
Ed Productions?
Yes, so I'm also the co-founder of Ed Anime Productions, which is a family-owned and operated company that creates educational programs for children. We have 2 programs available. We have Meltrek, which is an animated series that teaches children about the history, culture, and achievements of melanated people, of Black people. And we also have Conscious Ingenuity, which is a program that utilizes STEAM to build character, confidence, and capabilities.
So one word, everybody. This is my one word: progress and equality in America. One word. How do we progress in equality in this country, Pastor? Oh, you're on mute, Pastor. I'll go to Dr. Mays while you take it off mute. Dr. Mays, one word.
Fight.
Derek?
Political diversity.
Dr. Maat?
War.
So you're on the fight team too, huh?
I'm with Dr. Mays. Let's fight. Let's do it.
My goodness. We tired of fighting. People ain't tired of fighting. I'm so tired of fighting.
So much for Dr. King's vision, huh?
Pastor Hawkins?
If we didn't continue to struggle.
Pastor Hawkins, what word?
Testimony.
Testimony. Thank you so much for being on Business of Being Black. Fox Soulmates, get ready for Cocktails with the Queens next.
So me and the brother, Dr. Keith both said, he said fight, because I was going to say fight. And then he said, so I said, okay, I'll just say war. You get what I'm saying? Because it is a war going on. I know a lot of us think because we don't see tanks outside of the door, driving up and down your streets, you don't think you're at war. But it's a war going on, an external and an internal war going on. But family, let me take it back here.
Join the team that cares bravely.
Skip through this.
We're
commercial.
looking for professionals who share.
There
our
was one
mission
thing that
to
was said that I would like to address. And that is when the pastor blamed Black men for mass incarceration. I have to address that, and I want to address that by referencing the new Jim Crow by Dr. Michelle Alexander. So I just can't
always
let that
have.
ride.
I tell my students all the time.
Daughter. As a matter of fact, I recently saw an interview out in Atlanta, Georgia, where it's kind of becoming the center of voter suppression. I worked for whites in 2020, 98.
African American anything.
Third, the
suggests that racism still exists because there's a mindset. That's the problem.
Verbs that it placed white people at the top of this came laws, a package of laws.
We had 2 consecutive Black secretaries of state.
I had to fight for my lunch and struggle.
Why do they have to lose their rights to be a citizen and not be able to vote? Is that a function of white racism, or is that a function?
Here it is. So Keith, okay, so here it is. I found it, family. It took me some time, but I found it. This is where the pastor blames Black men for mass incarceration. I have to address it. So Dr. Keith Mays is talking about, the penal system, right? And he's saying that it's filled with Black men And when black men go to prison, they lose their right to vote. And he's saying that this is racist, right? And so then the pastor blames black men for mass incarceration, and he's saying that we have a colorblind judicial system. So hold on.
Function of just the law being the law. Guess what? Let me say this right about the personal strivings.
I had to fight for my lunch and struggle real hard as a child. Today I hold 3 degrees.
Listen, Tammy, I'm with you. I mean, I come from the former mean streets of Harlem in New York City, born and raised working poor. And you're absolutely right, Derek. You know, I do have a doctorate. And you're absolutely right about the personal strivings of Black people. And yes, we could be more responsible. We could be more civic minded and be more civically engaged. There's no doubt about it. But it does not take away from the fact, like Dr. Maat said, about the structural aspects of what holds us back. Let me say this to you. So we were talking about voting rights, but no one questions, there are over 1 million Black people behind bars. Why is it that they have to lose their voting rights? Why do they have to lose their rights to be a citizen and not be able to vote? Is that a function of white racism, or is that a function of just the law being the law that said that, guess what, we're gonna say that felons can't vote if they commit a crime? So you're right, it shows up in the disparity when it comes to home. Derek, you mentioned home ownership. The home ownership in some states is 2 to 1, white to Black. Rates of incarceration. The unemployment rate is always, the Black unemployment rate is always twice, sometimes 3 times, 4 times the rate of white people. We can go on and on. Health disparities is another.
I would like to mention that Wells Fargo is facing a lawsuit right now as we speak because of not giving home ownership loans to Black people specifically. Pastor Hawkins, I'm going to have you address Dr. May's question when we return on Business of Being Black.
Okay, so let me fast.
Lee from Howard University with the Queens.
I love that hair. Being Black with Tammy Mack. I'm Tammy Mack, and the business of being Black today is America. Is it? Brian E. Hawkins. Pastor Hawkins, when you say San Jacinto, where is that located?
It's in Riverside County, Southern California.
In California, okay, because there's the San Jacinto in Texas as well, near Houston. So since we are a global show, I wanted to make sure we knew specifically. Dr. Mays talked about incarceration and how felons could not vote. You spoke to us earlier in the show and said that you have had that route. That's a part of your journey, your experience, being able to come out of jail and still be a representative. So how do you feel about felons not being able to vote?
Well, it all depends. First, great question.
And does that make, because obviously we all know that the jail and the prison system disproportionately affects Black men more than anyone else. So does that make it a racist law?
So I think, first of all, the justice system disproportionately criminals more than anything else. We shouldn't label how many people is behind bar based on colors, label it based on crime.
I'm sorry, say that again.
Yeah, because, people behind bars, color is not the crime. We often say, how many Black men are behind bars, but breaking the law is breaking the law regardless of color.
Yeah, but we've also found that when we go and we detect Black men who ended up not being guilty, they are disproportionately represented as well. So there are more Black men who are found guilty that in actuality are not guilty, that are serving prison time.
Absolutely. And then that has a lot to do with economic background. Most of the times you find those same cases of individuals who will probably use public defenders, as in the case we saw with O.J. Simpson in the 92 trial of the century, or 94, I believe it was. You have an overwhelming stash of cash, and you can hire the best attorneys. And not to suggest he did it or not, but however, that's what it is. I am an ex-felon.
So then it's really not about criminal activity that keeps us behind bars. It's about our financial status, which shouldn't that also be racist, considering we are disproportionately paid less and have less resources?
Absolutely not. I mean, you can't say something because individuals choose not to have, an economic background. I mean, Bill Cosby, another case. I mean, there are many individuals, how many athletes right now, that find themselves in some of the same situations. But to address statement. Yeah, I'm an ex-felon. My record is not expunged. I do have all my voting rights. Different states are different. I would definitely encourage different legislation in different states to advocate for. It's one of the reasons why I am running for Congress, because I do want to make sure that my portion of society, what I've been through, is to be a bigger voice for that. I don't believe anyone's rights should be infringed upon. I don't believe, as far as felony goes, I know that legislation, you can vote for certain things to change laws. I'm big on second chances. I'm big on making sure individuals do have their rights restored because I am an elected official. So I do speak towards that. I think that it's disingenuous sometimes when we often bring up that statement, not realizing that felons can vote for legislation that can change laws that can ultimately affect how much time an individual can get. And I think that should be a conversation too that should be had. You don't want a rapist to be able to vote on a law that can change the amount of time that a rapist will do in prison. I do have I'm not so much concerned with mass incarceration. I am why individuals are breaking the law in the first place.
So, Derek,
did you just hear what he said? He's not even worried about mass incarceration. Now, family, I purposely played the entire clip because the last time I took a clip of him on my IG page, just all you have to do is go to dr.maat, dr.maat_. I posted a clip. It went viral, 30,000 views. And my people, you all tore his tail up under the comment section. And he cried so bad. She distorted my words. She didn't play the whole clip. So you all heard the whole clip and how he's basically saying that the judicial system is colorblind, that color is not associated with crime. He's not concerned about the mass incarceration rate. You can't blame. This is what he said. You heard him out of your own mouths. Now, this is my rebuttal to what he said.
Derek,
can vote for legislation that can believe anyone's rights. I do have all my.
We are disproportionately paid less and have less resources?
Absolutely not. I mean, most of the time,
guilty. They are disproportionately represented as well. So there are more Black men who are found guilty that in actuality are not guilty, that are serving prison time.
Absolutely. And then that has a lot to do with economic background. The justice system disproportionately.
Being able to come out.
Here it is. I just want to play it one more time before I blow his tail up. Hold on.
Out of jail and
not
still
thing,
be a representative. So how do you feel about felons not being able to vote?
Well, it all depends. First, great question.
And does that make, because obviously we all know that the jail and the prison system disproportionately affects Black men more than any.
So Tammy just said it. The criminal system disproportionately affects Black men, right? Here's his rebuttal.
Anyone else. So does that make it a racist law?
So I think, first of all, the justice system disproportionately criminals more than anything.
The justice system disproportionately targets criminals, if anything.
Yeah, so we shouldn't label how many people is behind bar based on color.
We should think about how many people are behind bars based on color.
Label it based on crime.
I'm sorry, say that again?
Yeah, because, people behind bars, color is not the crime. We often say, how many Black men are behind bars, but breaking the law is breaking the law regardless of color.
Yeah, but we've also found.
Okay, so now we're getting ready to go. So The New Jim Crow by Dr. Michelle Alexander on page 8. She tells us at the bottom, in 1972, fewer than 350,000 people were being held in prisons and jails nationwide, compared with more than 2 million people today. So that's a stat. So 1972, you had 350,000. Well, what changed between 1972 and 2022? Well, there were laws and policies that disproportionately impacted Black people, i.e. Black men, right? Namely Black men, that caused for the influx of Black men in the penal system. So that's what she tells us. So I want you to remember that stat. In 1972, we had 350,000 people. Fast forward to page 60. Dr. Michelle Alexander goes into the drug offenses, and she said drug offenses are the single most important cause of the explosion in incarceration rates in the United States. She said most people in state prison for drug offenses have no history of violence or significantly selling activity. Arrests for marijuana possessions, a drug less harmful than tobacco and alcohol, accounted for nearly 80% of the growth in drug arrests in the 1990s. Between 1980 and 2000, the number of people incarcerated in our nation's prisons and jails soared from roughly 300,000 to more than 2 million. By the end of 2007, more than 7 million Americans, or one in every 31 adults, were behind bars on probation. It's page 60. Fast forward to page 93. Dr. Michelle Alexander tells us that our prison population leaped from approximately 350,000 to 2.3 million in such a short period of time due to changes in laws and policies. Laws and policies, not changes in crime rates. Laws and policies. I want to say that again. Our prison population leaped from approximately 350,000 to 2.3 million in such a short period of time due to changes in laws and policies, not changes in crimes rate. Yet it has been changes in our laws, particularly the dramatic increases in the length of sentences. Let's go to page 99. Page 99, she tells us that she said, if there are significant differences in surveys to be found, they frequently suggest that whites, particularly white youth, are more likely to engage in illegal drug dealing than people of color. Hold up, wait a minute. Remember on page 60, she said that it was, on page 60, she stated that drug offenses accounted for the soar in incarceration rates that we saw. So even though it says right here, it says that particularly white youth are more likely to engage in illegal drug dealing than people of color. They aren't filling the prisons up. It's people of color. She says one study, for example, published in 2000 by the National Institute on Drug Abuse, reported that white students use cocaine at 7 times the rate of black students, use crack cocaine at 8 times the rate of black students, and use heroin at 7 times the rate of black students. That same survey revealed that nearly identical percentages of white and black high school seniors use marijuana. The National Household Survey on Drug Abuse reported in 2000 that white youth aged 12 to 17 are more than a third more likely to have sold illegal drugs than African American youth. This is the very same year Human Rights Watch was reporting that African Americans were being arrested and imprisoned at unprecedented rates. Government data revealed that blacks were no more likely to be guilty of drug crimes than whites, and that white youth were actually the most likely of any racial and ethnic group to be guilty of illegal drug possessions and sales. Let me keep going, y'all. I'm hot. I'm on page 100. It says whites tend to sell to whites, black to whites. University students tend to sell to each other. Rural whites, for their part, don't make a special trip to the hood to purchase marijuana. They buy it from someone down the road. Nevertheless, black men have been admitted to state prison on drug charges at a rate that is more than 13 times higher than white men. The racial bias inherent in the drug war is a major reason that why 1 in every 14 black men was behind bars in 2006, compared with 1 in 106 white men. For young black men, the statistics were even worse. 1 in 9 black men between the ages of 20 and 35 was behind bars in 2006. These gross racial disparities simply cannot be explained by rates of illegal drug activity among racial disparities. Hold on, y'all. This is my last page. Actually, I got 2 more pages. Moving on to 101. Violent crime is not responsible for mass incarceration. She tells us in this book, laws and policies and conscious and unconscious bias, I added that, is responsible for mass incarceration. It says the murder rate cannot explain the growth in the penal apparatus. In the federal system, for example, homicide offenders account for 0.4% of the past decade's growth in the federal prison population, while drug offenders account for nearly 61% of that expansion. In the state system, less than 3% of new court commitments to state prison typically involve people convicted of homicide. As of September of 2009, only 7.9% of federal prisoners were convicted of violent crimes. So she says, okay, so that's 101. My last page, family. I'm on fire right now. See, I wish I see. If I would have had my books, I would have blew him up right there on the panel. So on page 117, she says right here, she mentions a study right here at the bottom where she says one widely cited study was conducted by the San Jose Mercury News. The study reviewed 700,000 criminal cases. So this is where she's going to mention the bias, right? The unconscious and conscious bias, right? Of our judges, the judges and the prosecutors. So she says one widely cited study was conducted by the San Jose Mercury News. The study reviewed 700,000 criminal cases that were matched crime by crime, okay, and criminal history of the defendant. The analysis revealed that similarly situated whites were far more successful than African Americans and Latinos in the plea bargaining process. In fact, it in quotes, at virtually every stage of pretrial negotiation, whites were more successful than non-whites. So how dare this pastor say, how dare he blame mass incarceration on black men? Because what he's really suggesting, when you really think about it, what he's really suggesting is that black men are more prone to criminality. That's what he's saying. If black men, if he's saying that we have or we exist, that we have a colorblind judicial system, right? That crime is not a color, the judicial system or the penal system is colorblind, but then you have the prisons being filled with black men. What he is saying, family, is that black men must be more prone to criminality than other groups of men, right? If black men are filling the prisons and the judicial system is colorblind. That's what he's saying. But shout out to our beloved sister, Dr. Michelle Alexander, for her book, family. If you don't have it, this is a must have. This is a must read. Okay. The New Jim Crow. So even though white boys sell drugs at a higher rate, use drugs at a higher rate than any other group of men, they're not filling the jails with white men. They're filling the jails with black and Latino men. That's what they're doing. And so it's laws, policies, conscious and unconscious bias that contributed to mass incarceration. So at any rate, family, I'm going to get out of here. I know I kept you all on for about an hour, almost 2 hours. And so I had to address what he said, and I'm going to post this clip. I know he's going to cry about it on Instagram. If you go to the other clip on my page, you'll see he was commenting under the page and going back and forth with people because they were tearing his butt up. And I'm going to title this, Pastor Blames Mass Incarceration on Black Men. That's going to be the post tomorrow. So family, if you aren't following my IG page, please make sure that you follow my IG page. It is dr.maat_. I just threw it in the chat, family. I just threw it in the chat. Okay. So follow me on IG because I'm telling you, it's going to be hilarious. And if you want to get a good laugh, go back to the other post of him where I titled it, Pastor says Tyler Perry is evidence that America isn't a racist country. He's all up and down the comments. Oh, she's being disingenuous. Oh, she's taking my words and distorting them. But you heard the words from the horse's mouth, family. You heard it from the horse's mouth. And so I'm going to play what he said, and I'm going to play my rebuttal to what he said. So family, thank you so much for tuning in. I'll probably be live on Friday around 7 to 8 o'clock p.m. with Baba Amin. We're going to be talking about the hijacking and the commercialization of Juneteenth, okay? The hijacking and the commercialization of Juneteenth. So join me back here between 7, be on the lookout, around 7 p.m., 8 p.m., between 7 and 8 p.m. for a notification from, my channel, okay? And if you haven't subscribed to my channel, be sure to head on over to YouTube, type in Dr. Maat, hit the subscribe button, and also hit the notification bell so that whenever I go live, you receive a notification. All right, family. So I'll see you on Friday between 7 p.m. and 8 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. Have a blacktastic rest of the week.